Brock Lesnar and Gunther could be happening at SummerSlam this year, if new reports are to be believed. We've got details on that. Plus, there was some concern for Finn Balor backstage at Raw this week after he competed on the show just weeks after suffering a head injury at WrestleMania against Edge. We've got the ratings for this week's edition of Monday Night Raw. A new number one contender has been announced for the NXT Championship. The grizzled young veterans appear on NXT this week, just after reports had indicated they had requested and been granted their releases from the company. Title matches have been announced for next week's edition of NXT. Tag teams implode on this week's edition of NXT. Von Wagner and Robert Stone, they split up, and Robert Stone looks to be becoming a commentator on NXT Level Up. The first images of WWE's new headquarters have been revealed. WWE has been nominated for a Sports Emmy, and when did the conversations begin about WWE moving to the 2-day format for WrestleMania? Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of World Wrestling Entertainment. Let's start off talking about Gunther versus Brock Lesnar, a match that some wanted to see happen at WrestleMania. Of course, it didn't. Gunther defended his Intercontinental Championship in a triple threat match. Brock Lesnar faced off against Omos. Now, late last year, there were reports that a potential bout between Brock Lesnar and current Intercontinental Champion Gunther had been internally pitched for WrestleMania 39. While the match obviously never took place, Gunther faced off, as I mentioned, against Sheamus and Drew McIntyre, while Brock faced off against Omos. The two did go face-to-face in the men's Royal Rumble match. Since then, Gunther has expressed interest in a match against Lesnar, with even Brock Lesnar himself saying he'd be open for the bout when speaking to Daniel Cormier on WrestleMania weekend. Well, it seems that the match may indeed be set to go down later on this year, per WRKD Wrestling on Twitter, who notes that the idea of a match between Lesnar and Gunther has been floated backstage, with them potentially set to face off sometime in the summer. Lesnar, of course, is seemingly set to face off against Cody Rhodes at WWE Backlash in Puerto Rico next month. He is set to return to next week's Raw to address Cody's comments from this week's show. Gunther is still seemingly on course for another Intercontinental Championship clash with Sheamus, potentially at Backlash or Money in the Bank in London. But seemingly we could get Brock versus Gunther at SummerSlam. Is that a match you want to see? And is SummerSlam the right time to pull the trigger on Gunther versus Brock? And there was some concern, as I mentioned, for Finn Balor this week. At WrestleMania 39, Edge defeated Finn Balor inside Hell in a Cell. But during the bout, the Rated R superstar threw a ladder that nailed Balor in the head, causing a serious wound to his head that required 14 staples to stop the bleeding. The Judgment Day member also revealed in an interview that he sustained a grade 2 calf tear in March that almost kept him from even wrestling at WrestleMania itself. Just 8 days following the gruesome injury, Balor competed against Rey Mysterio on the April 10 episode of Monday Night Raw, and per Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, they provided an update on Monday's Raw, noting that there was some concern backstage from some with Finn Balor working against Rey Mysterio, as he was said to be banged up. The former Universal Champion defeated Rey Mysterio with help from Dominic Mysterio on this week's episode of Raw. There's no word yet on Balor's condition following his latest match and his latest bout in action. Of course, if we get any more details on these injuries, his calf tear and his head injury, we'll let you know. But there was some concern reportedly backstage for the former Universal Champion. Speaking of Raw, we have the ratings for this week's episode on USA Network. Lots of people were interested to see how Raw would react last week. Huge numbers for the post-WrestleMania edition of the show. But also, how would the audience react? Because last week's episode was not great. Would people tune off and never come back, essentially? And kind of what happened, really. The viewership figure and demo rating for Monday's episode of Monday Night Raw on USA Network has been revealed. Per Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, Raw drew 1.818 million viewers. This is down from the April 3rd post-WrestleMania 39 edition that drew 2.260 million viewers. In the 18 to 49 demographic, Monday's show scored a 0.59 rating. This is also down from the week prior that scored a 0.76 rating. Despite the drop in viewership and demo, WWE ranks number 1 in the 18 to 49 demo on cable for the night. The show featured Solo Sikoa defeating Kevin Owens in the main event. Post-match, the Bloodline jumped Owens until Sami Zayn and Matt Riddle arrived at the building to make the save and even the odds. Also, Cody Rhodes responded to Brock Lesnar's attack from the week prior and challenged the Beast to a singles match at the upcoming Backlash event next month. What did you think of Raw this week, and what do you think of the ratings? Are they better than you expected? Worse than you expected? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, NXT had been hyping up this big number one contenders match for the NXT Championship, and we now know who the new number one contender is going to be, with a big fatal four-way featuring JD McDonough, Dragon Lee, Grayson Waller, and Duke Hudson to determine who would become the number one contender to the NXT Championship. It was anyone's guess who would come out on top, with Dragon Lee showing off impressive offense throughout the match, including a close near fall on JD McDonough. He seemed primed to rocket directly into the championship picture mere weeks after his debut. However, in the end, while Lee was attempting a pin on Duke Hudson, he instead got caught in a stunner from Grayson Waller, who was able to capture the pinfall victory and the next title shot. In 2 weeks, live on USA Network, Spring Breakin' will feature an NXT Championship match between Grayson Waller and champion Carmelo Hayes. The show ended with both Waller and Hayes having a face-to-face on the entrance ramp. So we now know the number one contender is Grayson Waller, and we also know when Spring Breakin' is going to be taking place. Now, this is just such a fascinating story, isn't it, when it comes to Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed of the Schism. Fightful have reported a week ago that Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed of the Schism had requested to be released from WWE, and then Dave Meltzer took it one further. He reported that the release had been granted, i.e. Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed, they were no longer with the company. However, Meltzer soon said it was actually up in the air and might not have been official, despite Fowler and Reed believing it was. They ended up being at last week's NXT tapings after the reports, and they were again on the TV show tonight. Not only did they appear on WWE television, they seemingly kicked off a program with a pair of champions. The Dyad, that being Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed of Schism, were featured in a backstage segment alongside their two other roots, Joe Gacy and Ava. Interestingly, they stepped up to the NXT Tag Team Champions Gallus, who was back at three-man strength after the reunion of the Coffey Brothers and Wolfgang. Since the Gallus boys are always up for a fight, it seems we'll be getting a future match between these two hard-hitting tag teams. However, later in the show, the Creed brothers also challenged Gallus to a tag team title match on next week's NXT, so we'll have to stay tuned to find out who indeed gets the next title shot. But they're not going anywhere, so I guess the releases weren't granted after all. Speaking of that, we did just kind of hint at this. There are title matches that have been announced. Several big matches were announced for next week's episode of NXT, including two big championship matches. Next week on NXT, there will be an NXT Tag Team Championship match pitting Gallus against two big teams. The Gallus boys will be putting their titles on the line against the Dyad, as I mentioned, and the Creed brothers in a big triple threat match. Another championship will be on the line next week when champion Wes Lee puts his North American Championship on the line against Charlie Dempsey. And after a problematic backstage interaction on last night's show, Zoe Stark is set to potentially eat her words when she takes on Roxanne Perez, who she mocked backstage about her anxiety. So big matches have seemingly been announced for next week's show as well. Now, last night's episode of NXT was filled with tag team implosions and teams and alliances being broken up, certainly. Two different tag teams seem to have dissolved on last night's edition of NXT. On last night's episode, when former NXT Women's Tag Team Champions Kiana James and Fallon Henley had their championship rematch, things went awry. Before the match, a feuding Kiana James and Fallon Henley had to be broken up in lieu of a backstage brawl by Josh Briggs. It was then that James informed Henley and Briggs that Brooks Jensen wouldn't even be at ringside because he wanted nothing to do with the two of them. After the match kicked off against the dastardly duo of Alba Fyre and Isla Dawn, who won the bouts from James and Henley at NXT Stand and Deliver, Jensen would finally appear. While he tried his best to persuade Fallon Henley to use James' bag as a weapon, he instead got himself ejected from ringside, and in the final moments, all hell broke loose. By the end of the match, not only had the champs retained their titles, but it seemed that both Kiana James and Fallon Henley and Briggs and Jensen's tag teams could be done for. Jensen pushed Briggs to the ground and carried James away, leaving Briggs down at ringside and Henley get beaten in the ring. So a lot of drama going on in the Women's Tag Team Championship picture, and two tag teams seemingly they're done. Speaking of done, Von Wagner and also Robert Stone, they're done as well. As was the stipulation, if an NXT star lost their match, they would also lose their manager. And indeed, that happened. On last night's NXT, Von Wagner faced off against Ilya Dragunov with the stipulation that if he lost the match, he would also lose the representation of Robert Stone. After a hard-hitting affair between the two NXT stars, it was actually the smaller Dragunov who bested the big Von Wagner via pinfall. After the match, Robert Stone made it clear he intended to stick to his word of parting ways with Wagner in the event of a loss. Now, this may have led into what Robert Stone's next role is going to be in WWE, and that is one of a commentator. In advance of last night's episode of NXT, matches were filmed for NXT Level Up with a notable addition to the commentary team. Robert Stone joined the commentary team for Level Up ahead of before he appeared on screen during the NXT episode. Stone called the action alongside the usual Level Up team of Blake Howard and Byron Saxton. Of course, now this is going to air after NXT, so maybe now that he's no longer the representative of Von Wagner, he's going to be a commentator going forward for that show. Not that a lot of people watch it, but this could be his role in WWE going forward, I guess. Now, this is the first look. There you go, right there. It seems crazy to think of a WWE headquarters that isn't Titan Towers, but there you go. Look, that is the new WWE headquarters. The first photo of the new WWE headquarters has circulated online. Built in 1989 and opened in 1991, Titan Towers in Stamford, Connecticut served as WWE's headquarters for 3 decades. In March 2019, the company announced they would be selling Titan Towers and relocating their headquarters to a new location in Stamford, Connecticut. Originally scheduled to be moved in 2021 and later being delayed to late 2022, WWE officially started the process of moving their headquarters in March of this year. A photo of the new headquarters has been revealed in a social media post, which can be seen on the screen right now. The new headquarters will be officially completed by early 2024. As previously reported, WWE Executive Chairman Vince McMahon has had his hand in the creative process in the company, overseeing the plans for this week's edition of Raw. But in addition to that, he's been heavily involved in the transition from this one headquarters to the other. There's been quite a lot going on when it comes to the logistics involved in all of this, but for the first time, that's the look. The WWE sign is up, and it's kind of weird, isn't it? It's very weird, but certainly WWE undergoing a lot of change at the moment. Now, WWE has been nominated for an Emmy. Yes, that is not a misprint. I haven't just misspoken. I usually do on these shows. But no, WWE has been nominated for an Emmy Award. The 44th Annual Sports Emmy Award nominations were announced yesterday. And amongst the nominees, WWE made an appearance. In the category of Outstanding Long Documentary, Peacock and WWE are nominated for the film Woo, Becoming Ric Flair. It faces opposition from fellow nominees Citizen Ash on tennis star and human rights activist Arthur Ashe, the Redeem team about the US men's Olympic basketball team's quest for gold at the 2008 Olympics, NYC Points Gods, and After Jackie. Woo, Becoming Ric Flair, delves into the details of the 5 decades-long career of the Nature Boy Ric Flair, featuring in-depth interviews from the man himself, as well as those closest to him about his immense success and spectacular setbacks. This is WWE's first nomination for a sports Emmy. Notably, WWE's new partner under the Endeavor banner, UFC, was also nominated for a pair of sports Emmys. In the category of Outstanding Edited Special, UFC was nominated for their UFC Year of the Fighter profile on Amanda Nunes on UFC Fight Pass. Also for Outstanding Short Documentary on an edition of Fight Law titled Mark Schultz's Ultimate Victory. So WWE nominated for a sports Emmy. Are they going to win? Do you think, have you seen any of those documentaries? If you've seen any of them, let me know. Are they worth watching? And out of all of them, if you have seen them all, which is the best? Which do you think is going to win? Finally, WWE moved to the 2-day WrestleMania format for WrestleMania 36 in 2020. Since 2020, WWE introduced the 2-night event for WrestleMania 36. Since then, it has been a staple of the biggest show of the year for the company. Speaking on the latest Oh You Didn't Know podcast, Road Dogg Brian James discussed WrestleMania 34 and revealed that the conversation of a 2-night WrestleMania started around 2018. He said, quote, 7 straight hours, I believe it was. Good night, Irene. Yeah, this is at the time where that conversation started. You know what I mean? Where it was like, this is too much. But then it's like, who has been productive for you all year that you're going to take off the show? That's a tricky situation to be in. And so this was one of the first years where that conversation started milling around like, hey, is there anything to doing this on 2 nights or 3 or something? So yeah, that conversation started because of those 7 8-hour nights like these. WWE is coming off the heels of their most successful 2-night WrestleMania in company history, with over 161,000 fans seeing the event at SoFi Stadium. Allegedly, of course, because when it comes to WWE and attendances, you never know what is exactly accurate or real. Nevertheless, there was a lot of people there. That's probably safe to say. There was a lot of people at WrestleMania this year. So there you go. So be sure to smash a like on the like button, guys. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below. A big week coming up of pro wrestling news as we continue to see the fallout of WrestleMania. We continue to see the fallout of course, the Endeavor acquisition of WWE and the merger of UFC. Vince McMahon, his involvement involvement and things of that nature. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Remember, you can join the WN365 roster by clicking that join button, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.